Have you ever wondered why so many people today can't tolerate bread? Why gluten sensitivity seems to be everywhere? Why bloating after a sandwich is just accepted as normal? Why entire aisles of grocery stores are dedicated to gluten-free alternatives? Here's what's wild. 2,000 years ago, bread was called the staff of life. It was the foundation of every meal. Jesus broke bread with his disciples. Ancient civilizations thrived on it, yet nobody was complaining about inflammation, brain fog, or digestive issues. So what changed? Did our bodies suddenly forget how to process wheat? Or did we fundamentally alter what bread actually is? The answer is going to surprise you, and it goes way deeper than just gluten. We're talking about a transformation so complete that calling modern bread and ancient bread by the same name is almost misleading. It's like comparing a wild salmon to a fish stick and calling them the same food. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why the bread that nourished civilizations for thousands of years has become something that makes millions of people sick. And no, this isn't about demonizing carbs or jumping on some trendy diet. This is about understanding what we've lost. Let's start with the grain itself. In Jesus' time, the wheat that grew in the fields of Galilee and across the ancient world was called einkorn, emmer, or ancient varieties of wheat that had never been touched by human manipulation. These grains had 14 to 28 chromosomes. They grew tall, sometimes 4 or 5 feet high, swaying in the wind with long stalks and small heads of grain. They were inefficient by modern standards. They produced less yield per acre. They were harder to harvest. But here's what made them special. Their protein structures were completely different from modern wheat. The gluten proteins were simpler, easier to digest, and the grain itself was packed with nutrients that worked synergistically with the human digestive system. Now fast forward to the 1960s. Scientists decided wheat needed to be more productive. We had a growing global population to feed, so they began crossbreeding wheat varieties, creating hybrid strains that were shorter, sturdier, and produced dramatically more grain per acre. This was the Green Revolution, and it was celebrated as a triumph of agriculture. Norman Borlaug won the Nobel Peace Prize for it. But here's what nobody talked about at the time. This new dwarf wheat had a completely different genetic structure. Modern wheat has 42 chromosomes. The gluten protein became more complex, more elastic, more resilient. Great for making fluffy Wonder Bread. Terrible for human digestion. Studies have shown that modern wheat contains gluten proteins that our ancestors never encountered. Our digestive systems are trying to break down something they weren't designed to handle. But the grain is just the beginning. Let's talk about how ancient bread was actually made, because this is where things get really interesting. In biblical times, making bread was a multi-day process. It wasn't something you rushed. Women would grind grain between stones every morning, creating fresh flour. But they didn't use it immediately. They would mix the flour with water and let it sit, sometimes for hours, sometimes overnight. They were creating a natural fermentation process using wild yeasts and bacteria from the environment. This is what we call sourdough today, but back then it was just bread. There was no other way to make it. Here's why this matters more than you might think. During fermentation, something almost magical happens. The wild bacteria and yeasts begin breaking down the complex proteins in the wheat, including gluten. They're essentially pre-digesting the bread for you. The phytic acid, which binds to minerals and prevents your body from absorbing them, gets neutralized. The resistant starches become more bioavailable. Enzymes break down compounds that would otherwise cause inflammation. By the time that bread went into the oven, it had been transformed at a molecular level into something your body could easily assimilate. The long fermentation didn't just make the bread taste better, it made it nutritious and digestible. Compare that to modern bread making. In 1961, a process called the Chorleywood bread process was invented in England. It revolutionized commercial baking and quickly spread to America. The goal was simple: make bread faster. Instead of hours or days of fermentation, this process could turn flour into finished bread in under 3 hours. How? By adding extra yeast, chemical improvers, hydrogenated fats, and intense mechanical mixing. The dough is literally beaten into submission with high-speed mixers that heat it up and force it to rise quickly. There's no time for fermentation. No time for enzymes to break down problematic compounds. No time for bacteria to neutralize anti-nutrients. The result is a product that looks like bread, feels like bread, but on a molecular level is completely different from anything humans ate for thousands of years. And we wonder why people feel sick after eating it. Your body is trying to digest something that hasn't been properly prepared. It's like trying to eat raw beans instead of soaked and cooked beans. The form is similar, but the effect on your body is completely different. The inflammation people experience isn't necessarily because they're gluten intolerant. It's because they're eating a form of wheat that hasn't been processed in a way that makes it digestible. Some people who can't tolerate modern bread have traveled to Europe and found they can eat traditional sourdough without any problems. It's not in their heads. It's biochemistry. Now let's talk about what else went into ancient bread. In Jesus' time, flour was stone ground. Those massive millstones you see in archaeological sites weren't just for show. They ground grain slowly, generating minimal heat, which preserved the nutrients in the wheat. The germ, the bran, the endosperm, everything stayed intact. You were getting the whole grain with all its fiber, vitamins, minerals, and healthy fats. The bread was dense, hearty, filling. You didn't need much of it to feel satisfied. Today, modern flour is made using high-speed steel rollers. The process generates heat that destroys heat-sensitive nutrients. But more importantly, they remove the germ and the bran because they contain oils that go rancid quickly, which is bad for shelf life. What's left is pure white endosperm, mostly starch and a bit of protein. It's nutritionally bankrupt. So what do? They fortify it. They add back synthetic vitamins, usually made in laboratories, trying to replicate what nature provided. But here's the problem. Your body doesn't recognize synthetic vitamins the same way it recognizes nutrients in their natural form, in their natural matrix, surrounded by all the cofactors that help absorption. It's the difference between eating an orange and taking a vitamin C tablet. The chemical might be similar, but the effect is completely different. There's something else ancient people did that we've completely abandoned. They didn't eat bread by itself. Bread in biblical times was always accompanied by olive oil, olives, fish, vegetables, herbs, cheese, wine. These foods created a complete nutritional profile. The fats from olive oil slowed down the absorption of carbohydrates, preventing blood sugar spikes. The fermented foods like cheese provided probiotics. The fish provided omega-3 fatty acids. Everything worked together. Compare that to how we eat bread today. A bagel with cream cheese for breakfast, a sandwich with processed meat for lunch, dinner rolls made from white flour, slathered with margarine. We've isolated bread from the dietary context that made it healthy and turned it into a vehicle for other processed foods. Let's also talk about lifestyle, because diet never exists in a vacuum. People in ancient times weren't sitting in cubicles for 8 hours a day. They were walking miles every day, tending fields, hauling water, building homes. Their physical activity levels were orders of magnitude higher than ours. When you're burning thousands of calories through physical labor, your body processes carbohydrates completely differently. Insulin sensitivity is higher. Inflammation is lower. Your muscles are constantly demanding glucose for energy. Bread provided that energy efficiently. But when you're sedentary, eating the same amount of carbohydrates without the activity to burn them off, those carbs get stored as fat, and the metabolic consequences start piling up. Here's something most people don't know. Ancient people also fasted regularly, not always by choice, but because food scarcity was real. There were lean times between harvests. There were religious fasting traditions. Your body would go periods without food, which gave your digestive system time to rest and repair. This is something we've completely lost in modern culture. We eat constantly. Breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, dessert, late-night snack. Our digestive systems never get a break. When ancient people did eat bread, their bodies were primed to use it efficiently. They weren't in a constant state of insulin resistance from overeating. Let's get into another critical factor that nobody talks about. Pesticides and herbicides. Modern wheat is one of the most heavily sprayed crops on the planet. Glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, is routinely sprayed on wheat fields right before harvest in a process called desiccation. It kills the plant and dries it out, making harvesting easier and more uniform. But glyphosate doesn't just disappear. It ends up in the wheat. Studies have found glyphosate residues in most conventional bread, crackers, cereals, and pasta. And here's the kicker. Glyphosate disrupts your gut bacteria. It was actually patented as an antibiotic. When you eat bread contaminated with glyphosate, you're not just eating wheat. You're eating a substance that damages the very bacteria in your gut that help you digest food, including wheat. Is it any wonder people have digestive problems? Ancient wheat was grown without any of this. No synthetic pesticides, no herbicides, no chemical fertilizers. The soil was alive with microorganisms. The wheat grew slowly, developing deeper root systems that absorbed more minerals from the earth. Crop rotation was standard practice. Fields were left fallow periodically to regenerate. The result was grain that was nutrient-dense and free from chemical residues. Your body wasn't fighting a toxic load while trying to digest your food. There's also the issue of how fast we eat. In ancient times, meals were communal events. You sat down with family or community. You broke bread together, literally. You ate slowly, talking, laughing, enjoying the company. This wasn't just pleasant. It was physiological. When you eat slowly and in a relaxed state, your parasympathetic nervous system activates. This is rest and digest mode. Your body produces digestive enzymes. Your stomach churns food properly. Nutrients are absorbed efficiently. Contrast that with how most Americans eat today. In the car, at a desk, standing up, scrolling through a phone, stressed out, rushing. When you're in a stressed state, your sympathetic nervous system is active. This is fight or flight mode. Digestion is not a priority. Your body shunts blood away from your digestive organs to your muscles. Enzyme production drops. You're literally eating in a physiological state where your body can't properly process food. Then we blame the bread. Let's talk about ingredients. Go pick up a loaf of supermarket bread and read the label. You'll see a list of 20 or 30 ingredients. Enriched flour, high fructose corn syrup, soybean oil, calcium propionate, monoglycerides, diglycerides, azodicarbonamide, DATM, calcium sulfate, ammonium sulfate. Most people can't even pronounce half of them. These are dough conditioners, preservatives, emulsifiers, bleaching agents. They're added to extend shelf life, improve texture, make the dough easier to work with in factory settings. But every single one of these chemicals is something your body has to process. Your liver has to detoxify them. Your gut has to figure out what to do with them. And many of them disrupt your gut microbiome or trigger immune responses. Ancient bread had 3, maybe 4 ingredients: flour, water, salt, wild yeast from the environment. That's it. No additives, no preservatives. If bread went stale, you made it into something else, bread pudding or croutons, or you fed it to animals. The concept of bread staying soft for 2 weeks on a shelf would have been absurd. Food was fresh or it was gone. This simplicity meant your body only had to deal with recognizing and processing actual food. We should also address sugar. Modern commercial bread is loaded with added sugars. High fructose corn syrup is in almost every mass-produced loaf. Why? Because sugar feeds yeast and speeds up the rising process. It also makes bread slightly sweet, which people find appealing. But ancient bread had no added sugar. The only sweetness came from the natural sugars in the wheat itself, which were minimal. This meant ancient bread had a low glycemic impact. Modern bread, even whole wheat bread from the store, can spike your blood sugar as fast as a candy bar. This is partly because of the added sugar, partly because of the refined flour, and partly because the lack of fermentation means there's nothing to slow down starch digestion. There's a broader pattern here that goes beyond just bread. We've taken foods that humans ate for millennia and industrialized them beyond recognition. We've optimized for shelf life, convenience, appearance, and profit margins. We haven't optimized for nutrition or digestibility. The result is a food supply that's abundant in calories, but deficient in real nourishment. And bread is just one example. You could tell the same story about milk, meat, eggs, vegetables. Almost everything has been altered in ways that prioritize industrial efficiency over human health. So what do we do with this information? First, understand that if bread makes you feel bad, you're not broken. The bread is broken. Your body is responding appropriately to something that isn't real food. Second, if you want to eat bread in a way that's closer to how our ancestors ate it, you have options. Seek out true sourdough bread made with long fermentation. Look for bakeries that use organic heritage grains. Einkorn flour is available online. You can even learn to make your own sourdough. It's not complicated. Flour, water, time. Let biology do the work. Third, remember that bread should be part of a meal, not the meal itself. Eat it with healthy fats, proteins, vegetables. Slow down. Chew thoroughly, be present. And finally, recognize that this isn't about perfection or purity. It's about awareness. Once you understand what's happened to our food supply, you can make informed choices. Maybe you can't always eat ancient-style bread. That's okay. But when you do eat bread, you'll know what to look for. You'll understand why some breads make you feel energized and satisfied, while others leave you bloated and craving more. The bread that Jesus broke with his disciples wasn't just a religious symbol. It was real sustenance. It was made from grain that grew in living soil, ground by hand, fermented naturally, baked fresh, and eaten in community with gratitude. Every step of that process contributed to making it nourishing. We've lost most of those steps, but we haven't lost the knowledge. We can bring it back, one loaf at a time. Because bread doesn't have to make you sick. For thousands of years, it didn't, and it doesn't have to now.